Hello, I'm Michael Wybrow, and in this video I'm going to talk to you about how we can display web pages in SwiftUI. So SwiftUI has a component called WebView, and this is an interactive view that can display web page content or HTML. So this can be both given a URL on the web like HTTPS and Google or another website like the Monash website, and it allows all the standard interaction you would expect, so things like scrolling and navigation. You can tap and follow links, and it provides additional modifiers that can customize behavior, like turning off particular gestures or giving it full screen behavior, for example. And you can also execute JavaScript through it. So let's have a look at a few examples of this. The very basic example would be that you just want to load a website like google.com, and you would import the WebKit framework, and what you would do then is you would have just a web view, and you would give it a particular URL which you can create from a string, and if in this case if that's a state variable, so if this URL was ever to change, then the view would get reloaded and the web page would refresh. So that's the very simplest version, and that will create a full screen browser within a page or a tab of your app. Now if you want to do other things, you can also use a web view to display a different size and display your own web content that you specify as part of an HTML string. In order to do that, we need to use what's called a web page class or structure, and this one is a page that is used by a web view. So when you construct a web view, you can either give it a URL or you can give it a web page, and web page gives you the ability to specify HTML. It also gives you the ability to access some other properties of the page and to execute JavaScript. So for this example, we'll just see that you can access the title of the web page, and say you wanted to show that in a navigation title as part of a navigation stack. As we've seen before, you could do that. If you've got a web page like this, you need to load it, and when you load it, you can specify some HTML. And in order to do this, you also need to give a base URL. So when you've got local HTML, if it accesses a different file, like a style sheet or an image, it needs to know somewhere to look for that. So you can specify a base URL, which could be your apps bundle, or it could be a temporary directory or something else. Here I've just specified as that, and I've also forced unwrap it. Please don't do this, but you might specify a different directory if the resource URL was unavailable. The other thing to note here is web page load returns an async sequence, and this is because after you load the initial HTML, the user can still interact with it, and if they follow a page link, they perform some navigation, and that will reload the page within the web view. And when it does this, you can encounter errors. So this weird sequence here, we've got a task block. We're awaiting something that happens asynchronously because the load might take some time. But this has a for loop, which you can see it's doing for try await in, and then it's got the result here. So this is code that this task block is just going to keep running, waiting on that async sequence, because it doesn't know how many times the user is going to interact with it. So that's just something to be aware of, and a pattern we need to use. Obviously we would handle the errors in a better way than just my comment here. The other thing we can do when we have a web page is we can load a URL in the same way we did in the earlier example. And one of the other things we can do is we can run JavaScript, and this can be useful to interact with a web page in some way and either take some data from your app and inject it into the web page, or read something from the web page and put it back into your app. So how might we do this? Let's say we've got a state variable called output that we'll use to get some output from the web page. You can create a toolbar button, in this case a run button. That's just going to run, I've just got Apple script just to give it a little icon. That is just the SF symbol name. And we're going to call our own function here or method called run JavaScript. And it's an async method. Ooh. So we need to wrap it in a task block because that's going to happen asynchronously. And that's triggered when the user interacts with the toolbar button. As before, we're going to load the web page. We've got the same pattern here because the load here can return an async sequence, or does return an async sequence, so we need to handle potentially multiple errors. And let's have a look at this run JavaScript method. So this is what it looks like. It's going to run on the main actor, which means it runs on the main thread but runs asynchronously. So it will wait until the main thread is free and then this will get run. And what it does is it asynchronously, which you can do because this is an async method, it asks the web page to call some JavaScript. And this is a way of creating a string that has new lines. So you can say quotation mark 3 times and it ends here. And this is one string that's made up of these 3 lines here. So we're going to call this and it's going to give us back a result. And then what we're going to do when we get the result, and this output line is indented a bit weird, but we're going to just create a string from it and save that to our state variable. And if that all fails, we're going to save a different output state variable called this. So, and you can see the JavaScript that we're actually running here is doing a couple of things. First off, we're going to update something within the page. So we're asking the document, and this is JavaScript, we're asking the document to get an element by ID that's called message. So we assume the page has an element with an ID message. We specify its text content and set that to a string here. And this string could be something that we specified out of our own app's code or something entered by the user. And the other thing we're doing is we're reading a value from another element called important value, but you could get the element by class instead of ID, and we're getting its text content. And we're returning this, and that's what the result here will be. Okay, thanks for watching.